Argentina.
Raise your placards, please.
Excuse me, all delegates, please pay attention. We're doing our first mock meeting. This is what is going to happen on the day itself. So please pay attention.
Yeah, this might be easier to read.
Okay?
Right, Argentina, please raise the placard. So, we now call the General Assembly to its first plenary meeting. I will now do the roll call for all the countries present. Please raise the placards. I'm calling Australia, which is absent. Oh, okay, present. Argentina, Guatemala, Japan, France, Suriname, India, Qatar.
Excuse me, 50 delegates, when they raise their placards, state that they are present. Thank you. Present.
South Korea,
Present.
Mexico,
Present.
Germany,
Present.
Zimbabwe,
Present.
Brazil,
Present.
Jamaica,
Present.
South Africa, Guyana,
Present.
Spain, Thailand,
Present.
Peru. Is Peru present? Okay, Peru is absent. Israel,
Present.
Israel, Thailand,
Present.
Kenya. Is Kenya present? Malaysia,
Present.
Colombia,
Present.
Cyprus, Libya, Honduras, Somalia, Greece, Nigeria, TNT, Trinidad and Tobago. So Trinidad is absent. Pakistan. Is Pakistan present? Egypt?
Present.
Austria? USA?
Present.
Turkey? Cuba? Canada? Czech Republic?
Present.
Panama?
Present.
Norway? Iraq? Is Iraq present? Russia? The Philippines? United Arab Emirates?
Present.
United Kingdom? Belgium? Syria? Venezuela, China. Alright, so I now invite the delegates of the General Assembly.
One second.
Some delegations didn't get called.
If you know that a problem like human trafficking is prevalent in your country, for example, Russia, you want to say present and voting due to the fact that the problem is prevalent in your country, and that states that you are interested more so than just being present about the resolution. So if Venezuela was here, they would say present and voting. Somalia would say present and voting. Russia would say present and voting.
Can I go hold on?
No, but that's what I'm saying. If you know the problem is prevalent in your country, because it states that as a country you have an interest in solving the problem.
Anybody didn't hear the countries being called?
Whoever didn't hear the country being called, just raise the placard, please. We have a number of countries there.
Yeah.
Barbados, Mozambique, Ghana, and Iran.
I'm not seeing
Rohan.
Iran. Yeah.
Is it there? Is everything there?
Wrap or change. Who's present, who's not present. Because remember, you're supposed to be able to put it in order. So even if someone is present or not, you can say, no, they're not present.
The quorum delegates.
So a few countries weren't called: Barbados,
Present.
Iran,
Present.
Mozambique.
Present.
Anybody else didn't hear the name?
Ghana.
Ghana. Okay, yeah.
Did everyone hear the name?
Okay. So we will observe 1 minute of silence. Silent prayer. Okay, so I now hand over the floor to the Secretary General to give a short speech on this issue.
Good morning to the President, Chairman, Vice Presidents, Special Rapporteur on Human Trafficking, and the esteemed delegates of this General Assembly. I stand before you as the Secretary General of this Model United Nations to present an update on the United Nations progress with respect to human trafficking in persons. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Article 3, Paragraph A of the Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Human Trafficking in Persons defines trafficking in persons as the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of persons by means of the threat to use of force or other forms of coercion, of abduction, of fraud, of deception, of the abuse of power, of a position of a vulnerability, or of the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person for the purpose of exploitation. Since the year 2000, 117 countries have signed and ratified a protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish human trafficking in persons, especially women and children, supplementing the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. Despite this milestone achievement in the battle against human trafficking, we are still plagued with it today. The International Labour Organization estimates that there are 20 million victims of human trafficking globally. 68% of them are trapped in forced labour. 26% of them are children. 55% are women and girls. 18.7 million people are in forced labour in the private economy, exploited by individuals or enterprises. Out of these, 4.5 million are forced into sexual exploitation, and 14.2 million are forced labour exploitation in activities such as agriculture, construction, domestic work, and manufacturing. Women and girls represent the greatest share of forced labour victims, 11.4 million, as compared to the 9.5 million men and boys. As we continue to fight what can only be described as one of the greatest ongoing national disasters, I call upon this General Assembly to act swiftly and decisively in reaching a final decision to put an end to this crime.
Thank you, Secretary General. We will now move to set the agenda. It will be taken that the agenda has been previously approved by Member States. So I now invite the Rapporteur to introduce the resolution for consideration by the General Assembly.
The United Nations General Assembly, Strengthening Measures and Responses to Human Trafficking, Draft Resolution 3/2050. The General Assembly, deeply concerned by the negative economic and social implications related to organized criminal activities, and convinced of the urgent need to strengthen cooperation to prevent and combat such activities more effectively at the national, regional, and international levels. Noting with deep concern the growing links between transnational organized crime and terrorist crimes, taking into account the Charter of the United Nations and the relevant resolutions of the General Assembly. Affirming the commitment of member states to the protection of equitable human rights as defined in Article 1 of the Charter of the United Nations. Recalling Article 3 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, providing for the unalienable right to life, liberty, and security of persons. Affirming the commitment of member states to the protection of equitable human rights as defined in Article 1 of the Charter of the United Nations, guided by the deep concern for the welfare of victims of human trafficking and condemning all forms of human trafficking. Urges all member states to sign and ratify the United Nations Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, no matter what their position, and the protocols thereto, as soon as possible, in order to ensure the speedy entry into force of the Convention and protocols thereto. Encourages initiatives contributing to the unique economic, social, and cultural development of states that are most susceptible to human trafficking. Invites member states to formulate and adopt a comprehensive strategy in order to more effectively coordinate international efforts to combat human trafficking. Calls upon member states to eliminate the demand of every single form of exploitation and strengthen national laws, creating laws where necessary to hold the perpetrators of human trafficking accountable for any such crime. Advocates member states to sentence perpetrators of human trafficking according to the severity and type of the crime, in accordance with respective cultural and religious specificities and domestic legislation. Urges member states to promote international cooperation in ensuring legal means of cross-border travel to prevent smuggling of persons as an incentive to human trafficking. Urges further member states to engage in cooperative efforts in abolition of human trafficking through information sharing in relation to perpetrators of human trafficking, and to promote equal access to technological resources in pursuing such perpetrators. Calls upon member states to make and take up strategy in order to more effectively organize international efforts to combat human trafficking. Invites member states to provide and expand financial assistance to the UN Voluntary Trust Fund for victims of human trafficking to aid in the accomplishment of the previous clauses. A stipulated amount for each member state shall be decided by an independent committee.
We now call upon the vice presidents of their blocks to present their majority position paper. I call upon the vice president of Europe.
All protocols observed. I will now present you with the block position paper for the European. Trafficking in human beings is a serious crime and a gross violation of human rights, which can be classified as a modern form of slavery. It occurs all over the world and affects almost every country as an origin, transit, or destination country, or sometimes a combination of all. The global scale of human trafficking is difficult to quantify due to the hidden nature of the crime. Figures often may have been based on conflicting definitions or compiled for different purposes and therefore seldom comparable. Trafficking in human beings is often linked with other forms of organized crime. According to the United Nations, it is considered the second source of illicit profits for organized criminals after those obtained from the drug trade. European Union countries reported 15,846 victims of human trafficking between 2013 and 2014, 76% of which were women and girls, according to a European Commission report. However, the actual number of victims could be far higher than the ones reported. 2 out of 3, 67%, registered victims were trafficked for sexual exploitation, 21% for other types of forced labor, and 12% for other reasons such as begging, organ removal, or domestic servitude. The majority of identified victims are from an European Union country. The Parliament's rule. Members of Parliament adopted an anti-trafficking directive in 2011, covering anything from prevention to victims, support, and the prosecution of offenders. In 2016, members of Parliament assessed current European legislation to combat human trafficking and recommended several measures to improve the situation in 2 resolutions adopted in May and July. Members of Parliament called on the European Union countries to better implement existing laws and provide better support to victims. Traffickers exploit vulnerable people for financial gain by tricking or forcing them into mainly prostitution or less common forms of exploitation, including forcing victims to beg and removing and selling their organs. Trafficking in human beings is often linked to other forms of organized crime. The UN estimates it's the second. Okay, wait. How does it happen? Recruitment victims are recruited by acquaintances, relatives, or criminal gangs, often with promises of well-paid jobs. Transportation victims may be moved from remote rural areas to cities or from poorer to richer countries. Manipulation and coercion traffickers control victims through deception and the threat of force. Where are the root causes of trafficking in human beings? Vulnerability due to poverty, marginalization, economic exclusion, armed conflicts, social and gender inequality, discrimination against ethnic minorities, and infringements of children's rights. Inadequate laws and policies in many countries seek the risk of getting caught. Okay, thank you.
We now call upon the Vice President of Asia to deliver their majority position paper.
Thank you. All protocols observed. We are grateful for the opportunity to be able to present our circumstance with regards to the manifestation of human trafficking within the Asia-Pacific region. As member states of the United Nations, we recognize that this issue occurs within the Asia-Pacific region. Human trafficking is one of the most severe yet prevalent crimes all around the world. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, in 2006 it was made known that the manifestation of trafficking in the region has been estimated at the ratio of 3 for every inhabitant, with the global ratio being 1.8 for every 1,000 inhabitants. In one of the research studies conducted by the US State Department, it shows that there are approximately 600,000 to 800,000 people trafficked across international borders every year, of which 80% are female and half are children. It also mentions that there are estimated 27 million victims who were trafficked, and out of those people, approximately 24 million are from Southeast Asia, 89% of the victims living in the area. The seriousness of human trafficking in Southeast Asia suggests that it is not a historical issue, but an ongoing issue that needs a long-lasting resolution. Although many of the victims of human trafficking were manipulated into their circumstances due to the widespread poverty and socio-cultural atmospheres specific to the region, voluntary trafficking occurs on the fundamental basis of money. Countries such as Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, and Cambodia, where human trafficking often takes place, are places where the population lives below the international poverty line, which is $1 per day. Approximately 12% of the population of human trafficking in Asia is men, 22% of which is children, and 66% women. Prevalent in Asia is the notion that a man is superior to a woman. Nationals of the Asian Pacific region take human trafficking, sex trafficking, and child labor for granted. It has become a normality, a mere day-to-day occurrence. Children in Southeast Asia have difficulties in receiving proper education in their early ages, causing them to start working or becoming a part of the human trafficking network from their early ages for financial support. Quote, "This is why it's so difficult to eliminate trafficking," Ahmed Sofian, a national coordinator of End Child Prostitution and Trafficking, ECPAT, in Indonesia, stated. It is indeed a vicious cycle that is difficult to be eradicated in the Asian Pacific region. Under UN principles, it has been highlighted that the mission is to ensure the primacy of human rights, prevent human trafficking, and assisting the needs of victims. Along with this, it is to strictly perpetuate criminalizing trafficking. With the growing concerns and the acknowledgement regarding the issue of human trafficking in Asia Pacific, for several years, the government's national and international organizations and networks delve into continuous research, developments, and efforts in order to combat the issue. A majority of the Asian Pacific region countries by the United Nations had adopted by the United Nations on the 25th of December 2003 the protocol to prevent, suppress, and punish trafficking in persons, especially women and children. Furthermore, since the degree of punishments and penalties for human trafficking in persons is apparently less than that for drug and armed trafficking, this protocol is aimed to strengthen the penalties for such global yet prevalent crime. It is believed that those efforts from the past will ultimately help to combat this issue. No one is perfect. Asia Pacific is no different. However, our presence here speaks volumes about our determination to eradicate human trafficking, modern-day slavery. Our future is bright as we stride forward toward a better chapter in this book of humanity, free of exploitation. We thank you.
We thank the Vice President for Asia Pacific. We now call upon the Vice President of the Americas and the Caribbean to deliver the majority position paper.
All protocols observed. The Americas and Caribbean nations are no strangers to the increase in the number of human trafficking due to the close proximity of the member nations. Over the past 2 years, we have seen a rising number of women and young children being targeted for sex trafficking, drug trafficking, and black market organ trafficking. It must be noted that many countries are yet to update prosecution methods and improve their detection rates. However, due to the varied economic situations, certain implementations must be gradual, if not immediate, if we hope to see an improvement in the exploitation of our fellow citizens. According to the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, 28% of total humans trafficked in the Caribbean nations are women. Of the whole, 64% are children in Central America. Despite our varied constraints, the need for greater protection of all, especially our young children, is of utmost importance. Therefore, we must all understand the benefits of working as a single unit in the General Assembly if we hope to see changes within our individual nations. We encourage members to comply with the proposals put forth in accordance with their own laws and regulations if we hope to see a major change in our world. Thank you.
We thank the Vice President for the Americas and the Caribbean. We now call upon the Vice President of Africa to deliver the majority position paper.
All protocols observed. Members of the General Assembly, we, the nations of the African region, have long been divided due to the lingering shadow of imperialism. However, despite this, today we stand together as a unit, a body of people representing nations with the common goal of safeguarding our people and bringing an end to the ruthless and barbaric crime of human trafficking. Not only do we stand united as an African bloc, but we stand here as part of the United Nations, as the crime of human trafficking is a global issue and so requires a global response to truly extirpate this form of contemporary slavery across the world. To some, it may seem as though our nations are not doing enough or giving their full attention to the problem. However, this is not the case. In the Trafficking in Persons report of 2016 by the US Department of State, the African community has shown great improvement in the detection and prosecution of human traffickers. Countries like Zimbabwe have shown an exponential increase in the detection and prosecution rates, rising by an astonishing 100% from 2015 to 2016 for crimes closely resembling and directly related to human trafficking. Notwithstanding this debate, as a plural and culturally diverse region, all cultures or governmental structures are not homogeneous. Countries such as Somalia and Libya are both experiencing social, political, and civil unrest, drastically detracting from their efforts to combat human trafficking. This unrest is a great push factor, causing many individuals to flee the country in hopes for a better life, and so has actually facilitated human trafficking, as refugees are manipulated or blatantly forced into the illegal organ, sex, and labor trades by the devils who seek to re-establish modern-day slavery. Human trafficking does not only reflect negatively on us as African countries, but it also hinders the development of our region. There is a significant loss of human capital and many human rights violations as trafficked persons do not usually have access to educational opportunities and basic needs, which is a main measurement of the calculation of countries' Human Development Index and hindering the work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, both set by the UNDP themselves. Moreover, in an effort to combat this paramount issue, Many nations like Ghana and Nigeria have developed human trafficking acts guided by the Palermo Protocol, which most member states out here have also signed and ratified. Therefore, we stand together with this assembly to promulgate the need for universal laws which deal with all aspects of human trafficking, not only addressing the perpetrators of the crimes, but the rehabilitation of the victims. Together we stand with this motion to put an end to human trafficking, united as a region, and more so, united as a world. Thank you.
We thank the Vice President of Africa for their contribution. The General Committee recognizes the delegation of United Arab Emirates.
Today, everybody of the General Assembly, we, delegation of the United Arab Emirates,
That's okay, I can leave it for
45 minutes to break for lunch.
Who seconds the motion? The General Assembly breaks for an unmoderated caucus of 45 minutes for lunch. We'll see you all at 1:45.